The End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act of 2023 from the Democrats in Congress wants to ban large hedge funds from acquiring extensive residential real estate, potentially even forcing Wall Street to sell off their single-family home holdings. So imagine the impact on the housing market if this legislation becomes law. With institutional investors currently owning a staggering 700,000 single-family rentals, about 5% of the entire market, this bill has the potential to significantly boost the availability of homes for individual buyers. Now, I want you guys to join me as we unpack the details and we explore just how this could possibly influence homeownership as well as generational wealth for working class Americans. I mean, big time Wall Street investors certainly aren't happy about this. Millionaire investor and businessman Kevin O'Leary called it downright destructive. And you know, when people like Kevin O'Leary get angry, that may mean that we're on to something. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. But first, here's an interview with Kevin O'Leary where he rips into the Congress bill trying to ban Wall Street from buying homes. Check this out.
Kevin, I'm really eager to get your take on this one. Democrats are introducing legislation to get hedge funds out of the housing market. New reports are revealing big investors accounted for over a quarter of all single-family home purchases in June. Okay, so on the one hand, Kevin, I hate this trend because it makes life hard for the little guy. On the other hand, I just don't want to see the government get involved any more than they already are in regulating housing. Where do you come down on this one?
Very bad idea, very bad policy. When you try and manipulate markets or sources of capital, and because that's really what's going on here, all of these different elements in our economy provide funding for all kinds of different sectors, including real estate, which is the 11th sector of the S&P. When it became the 11th sector, all kinds of different structures, including hedge funds, including private equity, including more speculative family offices, got involved in real estate. And so to actually decide, well, I'm going to pick this source of funding over this one is not what the government should be doing. I don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans, whoever they are. Stay out of the markets. Let the markets be the markets. That's what is so efficient about our economy. When you let it do its thing, it's the lowest cost of capital with the most liquidity. This kind of government policy is very, very bad and destructive.
So Wall Street and those big hedge funds may not be all that happy about this, but I'm certainly hearing a lot of support from this bill among many Americans. Now, for many, especially the working class, single-family homes should not be an investment to any investor. In a lot of places, 30 to 50% of homes are owned by investors looking to capitalize on Airbnb. And if they keep doing that, fine. But these people who took their millions and bought up every house that hit the market, that hit the supply at whatever price they needed to, effectively raising the price of homes to an astronomical amount, they kind of created this massive housing shortage and decline of many small towns. What do you guys think about that? Now, hoping to put a stop to this, or at least a dent, Democrats in Congress introduced a bill last month that would attempt to ban hedge funds, meaning large companies with deep pockets, from buying up swaths of homes. Filed by Oregon Democrat Jeff Merkley, the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act of 2023 would theoretically force large companies to eventually sell off all their single-family homes that they own. Now, the aim here is to restrict the access of large institutional investors to the housing market and hopefully make the American dream of home ownership more attainable for regular folks who might be losing out to big companies making those big cash offers on virtually any home that they can get their hands on. So this legislation is called the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act of 2023, and if it becomes law, it could very well shake up a growing segment of the housing market and potentially boost the supply of single-family homes for individual buyers. You can just look across the country, especially in the Sun Belt, Texas and all, and you just can't ignore the fact that institutional investors are becoming major players in home buying. I mean, right now, these big players, investors, and hedge funds combined, they own almost 700,000 single-family rentals. And that's a big chunk, about 5% of all of the available rental houses in the single-family home market. Now, over the past year, these institutional investors have been really just kind of going all in on this. A whopping 75% of all the purchases that these investors are making are now in the single-family zone. And it's making a significant impact. And there's plenty of research suggesting that this trend is only going to gain more steam in the future. So after the whole housing crisis in 2008, Wall Street decided to kind of dip its toes into the single family rental market, scooping up houses that were in foreclosure. And they've basically continued doing this ever since. As of June 2022, these institutional investors already owned about 3% of all single family rentals nationwide. But in more affordable places like Charlotte, North Carolina, their share goes up to as high as 20%, according to the Urban Institute. Now, even with the housing market showing some signs of slowing down, these investors aren't hitting the brakes at all. In fact, they bought 26% of the single family homes that sold in June 2023. So let's talk about what's being contemplated on Capitol Hill, Washington. This is the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act that would force large companies to eventually sell off their holdings. It's a bill that's been sponsored by Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, and it's being co-sponsored by the House by Representative Adam Smith of Washington, both Democrats, by the way. Though it's not likely to get passed, given the politics and how split the partisanship of our House is. But it definitely does bring up the conversation, at least. So this whole act is basically laying down the law for hedge fund investors in the real estate game. Now, if this law is passed, it would mean that over the next 10 years, they're going to force hedge fund investors to divest their single family real estate portfolios. And if they do dare to make any kind of future purchases, they'll be slapped with a 50% tax based on the fair market value. Now, I like that there's a 10-year sell-off so it doesn't just like crash the market instantaneously. That much is at least kind of good about this. Also, it gets corporations out of the buying pool and helps to lower prices. Because if you don't have to bid against corporations, people might actually have a chance of buying homes again. In a nutshell, the big part of this legislation is all about giving the boot to those institutional investors, creating more room for the regular Joes and Jims trying to just kind of secure a roof over their heads. Now, on the flip side though, critics say that this move could theoretically suck capital out of the market and could destabilize the whole thing. Basically, there's a lot of people that are advocates of this and of course opponents of this as well. So, like most things in America, it's a whole great big debate. Not to mention, if you already own a home and, if these hedge funds suddenly have to sell all their properties, even if it's stretched out over the course of 10 years, that would make it very hard for your home value to sustain itself, let alone appreciate over that time period. So homeowners probably don't really want to support that either, but I digress. Now, if you're finding this video informative, definitely don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more content like this. Your support means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys being a part of the Truth Exposed community. So let's continue. So front and center among the bill's critics is millionaire investor and real estate businessman himself, Kevin O'Leary. So during a recent appearance on Fox Business's The Big Money Show, Kevin O'Leary shared his strong criticism of the proposed legislation. Like you heard in the clip earlier, he thinks it's very bad policy when you try to manipulate markets or sources of capital. Simply put, he wants Congress to stay out of the markets. Let the markets be markets. So Kevin O'Leary argues that Wall Street provides a needed funding source for the housing market and it offers the lowest cost of capital. Senator Merkley counters that institutional investors are driving up home prices and the rents. So it's time for Congress to put in place common sense guardrails that ensure all families have a fair chance to buy or rent a decent home in their community at a price that they can afford. Now, last month arrived a Jeff Bezos-backed real estate company announced a new fund aimed at acquiring single-family homes. Very interesting. U.S. Representative Ro Khanna responded to this news in a post on X, saying that the last thing that Americans need is a Bezos-backed investment company further consolidating single-family homes and putting homeownership out of reach for more and more people. Housing should be a right, not a speculative commodity. Khanna's own Stop Wall Street Landlords Act calls for additional taxes to be placed on institutional investors that buy single-family homes. But then again, I don't know if this is just my skepticism talking, but I honestly really doubt that Congress would pass a law that would actually fix a problem without there being some kind of a giant loophole in this bill, if you know what I mean. Now, my guess is that this bill gets changed just before being passed to prevent smaller owners from owning real estate or rental properties. Now, to be honest, guys, what are the chances that Congress does something to actually regulate Wall Street? You know what I mean? Representative Smith admits himself that this bill has a tough road ahead. So far, the proposed legislation does not have any support from any Republican lawmakers. But for Smith, it's more of the symbolism of this bill. It's an important idea so people can begin to understand what's going on and we can begin to advocate for policies that better help working class people in our country. Now, the bill would require the IRS to tax large funds that that fail to sell off their single-family homes over the given time frame of 10 years. Hedge funds, defined as partnerships, corporations, or real estate investment trusts that pool funds from investors and have $50 million or more in net value or assets under management, with exemptions for nonprofits and companies primarily focused on construction. Hedge funds failing to report single-family home purchases would face a $20,000 fine that would go toward a housing down payment trust fund. Funds that fail to sell off their housing stock in the time frame required would face a tax of 50% of the fair market value for each property, with funds also going to the housing trust fund. Now, just to compare, in 2011, no single equity owned more than 1,000 single-family rental homes, whereas by 2022, hedge funds and institutional investors owned a cumulative 574,000 single-family homes. Now, this includes larger corporation owners like Invitation Homes, which owns more than 80,000 homes across the country. The practice has ramped up since then. In fact, since the beginning of the pandemic, with 28% of all homes sold in 2022 going to institutional investors, according to Pew Charitable Trust. Institutional investors have also been buying up multifamily apartments, and tenants across the country have been fighting back by forming unions to demand maintenance and push for stronger regulations. In separate legislation, Representatives Jeff Jackson and Alma Adams of North Carolina, both Democrats by the way, introduced the American Neighborhoods Protection Act on Wednesday. Now, that bill would require corporate owners of more than 75 single-family homes to pay an annual fee of $10,000 per home into a housing trust fund to be used as down payment assistance for families. Then again, the bigger problem is also the lack of new housing. The country needs anywhere from 2 million to 6.5 million units of new housing, and new constructions just are not keeping up. Now, apart from these bills that take it out on Wall Street, maybe Congress should be also looking into policies that support the production, investment, and development of new housing. I mean, there's more than one solution that can be done here. Am I right, guys? I just want to thank you guys for tuning in for today's video. Also, if you want to stay informed on the latest real estate updates and insights, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. So don't be shy. Drop some comments down below. I really appreciate your engagement. That's what keeps the conversation going. So anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys on the next one.